Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, canammissing project. Another copyrighted edition for our video channel. Welcome back. If you're a first timer, what I want you to do is grab a cup of hot chocolate, coffee, put your feet up, relax, and you're going to be in for a treat today because we're going to talk about some things that most people don't. And hopefully we'll walk you down a path of awareness. And if I can open the eyes of a few people out there, we'll be good. Some stunning new developments at the Can-Am home. I got notified last week that my channel was under review. And it was being reviewed for content. As I've told you before, I know that I've been under watch. I've never had a warning. I've never had a strike. I've never had an advisory to change my ways. But I got formally advised that they are reviewing my content. They didn't give a reason. I'm guessing somebody complained. But so far, nothing. Do I expect something to happen? Yeah. Probably be without any warning, and you'll try to come here someday and I'll be gone. They might simultaneously take down my Twitter, but they can't take down the website. Again, website canammissing, like Canadian American, canammissing.com. And you will find something there that will tell you what happened. Friends, there's no doubt our First Amendment rights are under attack. As I've stated many times in the past, I personally do not care what anybody says anywhere about anything. As long as you're not screaming fire in a crowded theater, I could care less what you say. And I don't mean that about our villagers. I care what you say. But I mean, if I read something online, if I read something that I blatantly know is false, if somebody's trying to forward propaganda, I don't care. But yet some groups, some tech companies believe that they need to protect us from our own freedom of speech. That is really, really of concern. And it should concern you. And when there comes a time that you want to talk about something and you can't, then you'll realize the importance of it. Right now, if you don't feel the need to talk out, yeah, you know, if they're controlling or they're putting parameters over somebody else's speech, who cares? You should care. And I know there's one side of the political spectrum that's getting throttled and the other side isn't. And the other side doesn't care because, oh, look at over there, they're getting their speech withheld. But you know what? Everything comes full circle. You should be concerned because you're next. Not because I want to do it, but that's just the yin and the yang of our world. You got to understand that. I don't think it's right, but I can't control it. This came up the other day in our talks. Most of us watch cable news shows. If not cable news shows, you watch cable TV. I'm going to talk directly about one channel, CNN. I was a huge watcher of that channel when MH370 disappeared in the Indian Ocean. I honestly believe that CNN and their analysts did an incredible job covering that story. Now, whether you disagree or not, I don't, whatever. But of all, and I would switch around and watch 5 or 6 different channels, but CNN basically went 24/7 about this and tried to cover every angle they knew with their reporters around the world. Now, since then, that channel has taken a nosedive. And what I mean by that is that you need to go out and look at their ratings. They are horrific. And they've been that way for several months. That's because people understand that CNN isn't reporting the news. It's a propaganda organization now. And the reason I'm saying that is it's a fact. Because when people leave a show that's supposedly reporting the news, and you watch some of their staffers just spew opinion, it's not a news show anymore. It's a propaganda show. That's just the facts. And the amount of people that have left are reflected in their ratings. And it's been many months like this. Now there's a point that I'm going to with this that's going to make a lot of sense. CNN, their organization, you would think, is supported by ad revenue, like most cable TV. It's ad revenue that generates the dollars and cents that they can pay for people around the world. The worse the numbers for subscribers or daily viewers or hourly viewers to a show, the less money you get for ad revenue. Let's just say you got 1 million people watching this specific news show from 5 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock at night every day of the week. 1 million people. And let's say for 1 million people, for a 1-minute ad, it costs you $20,000. Let's just say, I don't know what it is. And let's say that same show, the following month, drops and it only has 250,000 people viewing. There's going to be a huge crash in the amount of revenue you get for that 1-minute slot, because you have fewer viewers, and the people that are advertising know they're going to sell less product. Now follow this. CNN has had a crash for several months in their viewership. And what have they done to respond? Nothing. Friends, think about this. Their revenue from ads has declined sharply because of this. They are a for-profit business, yet they don't seem to care. Why? Why would that be? It has to be because they're being supported from an outside source to continue their propaganda. I want you to research who is paying CNN. Who are the philanthropists? Who are the people that are paying to keep CNN afloat? If you dig deep enough, if you dig hard enough, you're going to find the answers. And once you find those answers, it's going to be very clear to you the agenda that they want to promote. If I tell you right now, I'll get a bunch of hate mail. Oh, you're not right. You dig it up. You find it, and then you'll understand. But folks, it's not a normal news show. And once you understand that, which I just explained to you, if it was, they would change the way they report the news, but they're not. And they're going to allow those numbers to decline and their ad revenue to take a deep decline? Nope, no normal business would do that unless somebody was paying them to just continue on plodding down the same path, which is what they're doing. Then I want you to Google what is the best and most highly rated cable news show. You may not like the answers, but it may enlighten you as to who people now believe is telling the truth. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm just laying facts on you. And some people can't handle that. Some people live off emotion and they don't live in the world of facts. And when they start hearing facts that conflicts with their belief system, that's a meltdown. I get it. Now, many of these shows and many of the news organizations want to instill fear on you. Oh my gosh, we have another problem in the world and it's going to affect you. And oh my gosh, you got to be really careful, and you shouldn't go outside. And friends, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I want each of you to promise to yourself to take a deep breath and don't be afraid of what the news is spreading, whatever that might be. Don't. If you have mental health issues, don't stay indoors. Do something brave. Take a deep breath. If it's cold outside, put your coat on, put your cap on, and you don't want to look at people, put some sunglasses on. Take a walk around the block. You don't have to look at anybody. Just take a walk around the block. Maybe sit on a bench in a park. Look at the birds. Look at the wildlife. Look at the trees. Look at the leaves moving. Don't be isolated. Don't be staying in that room alone. Get out. Lately, there are groups talking about mental health that never talked about it before. Somebody sent me a video of a wrestling group, professional wrestlers, that talked about mental health. I bet they'd never done that before. Because it's becoming an issue very slowly. I saw some stat the other day that, there's been 23% more mental health issues in the emergency ward. That's a lie. That's a lie. But they're at least addressing it. Like I told you before, in LA County, they had an 800% increase in suicides. 800%. Just in the last year. So it was as of February of this year. But you're not hearing about it. Because their government doesn't want you to know. Okay, the first letter. Okay, sit back, have that cup of coffee. If I was sitting there, I would probably have my almond croissant with me right now. I just love almond croissants. That's a delicacy to me, especially in the morning. All right. Dave, I greatly enjoy your YouTube channel and your 2 movies. Missing 411 is one movie, documentary. Missing 411 The Hunted is the second one. Amazon has them both. I believe Hulu has them too. And YouTube Movies has Hunted. Okay, so you can watch them for free in most places. So around 1987-88, I was 14, 15 years old living in South Central Arkansas. Stop right there. Arkansas is a weird state, let me tell you. I've had some of the most unusual stories ever, and the most unusual missing person stories ever happen around Arkansas. There was a show on in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was called Brushes with Fame. And the show host was Ron Owens on KGO Radio. I like to listen to Ron. He's really a great middle-of-the-road broadcaster. And once a month, or once every other month, he had an hour called Brushes with Fame, and people would call in and he'd talk about, somebody you met who was famous and how they were or whatever. So I was doing a conference in Arkansas not too long ago. And I had to get on a bus really early in the morning to get to the airport, the hotel bus. And I get on the bus. It's a pretty nice hotel where the conference was at. And I get on with 3 guys, older guys, even older than me. I don't know who they were. And it was like a 45-minute ride to the airport. And these guys, you could tell they hated getting up early, and they start talking to the driver. And it was 3 Dog Night, the music group. And towards the end, one of the guys looks at me and goes, "Oh, what are you doing up this early?" And I go, "I was talking at another conference at the hotel, and I got to catch a plane." And he goes, "Oh yeah, this sucks, getting up early." You guys were really nice guys. And That was my brush with fame. So anyhow, offshoot on Arkansas. Anyhow, we lived in a rural area, and I had spent most of my childhood up to that point running through the woods with friends or alone with little care about anything dangerous or frightening other than stepping on a snake. I was fortunate enough to be able to deer hunt with a friend for several years on his property about 30 miles from my house. The hunting property consisted of several hundred acres of family land surrounded by a much larger plot which they had leased from a timber company. There was a very large high-banked creek that traversed the property and continued on for miles and miles, where I believe it eventually emptied into the Saline River. The area surrounding the creek was known as the Bottoms. It was virgin timber consisting mostly of massive oak, hickory, sweet gum, and a few pine trees. The creek bottom area was thick and dark and full of wildlife. The old-growth bottomland continued onto the neighboring properties on both sides. It was November time frame. Not sure if it was still legal in Arkansas. I no longer live there, but at the time you could hunt deer with dogs, but only on certain weeks. On the day in question, it was not a dog season, so we were just going out to hunt deer in stands and see what came by. It was a pretty slow-moving morning, so in the afternoon someone decided that we would abandon the stands and try to drive some deer out of the bottoms by people walking on foot, forcing the deer into the more open areas where we could get a shot. I have hunted since I was a little kid, shot a buck with a .410 shotgun when I was left alone with my dad on a hunt when I was 9 years old, but had somehow never taken part in a deer drive hunt. My friend, his dad, and I drove an old International Scout Jeep from the camp house, crossed the big creek, and headed for the far edge of the bottoms, where it opened up somewhat adjacent to a large power line right-of-way. The Jeep trail intersected an older, unused trail with a little bit of visibility left to right, so I jumped out there. My friend and his dad continued on to the high line, and I heard the Scout fade into the distance. I walked down the old trail until I came to a massive old oak tree that I figured I could lean against and provide me with some concealment as I looked back into the bottom land. I had a Marlin 30-30 lever action rifle with a cheap scope that I could hit anything within 100 yards. Two older men from camp were going to be the drivers, but they were going to delay a while to let the shooters get into position. Okay, this is where it gets weird. As I leaned against the tree, I noticed there was no wind. I know about that. Since I was not positioned high up in a deer stand, I was hoping for at least a light wind to provide more visual and audible distraction for any deer wandering by. Along the way, and only a few seconds from my selected location, I had to walk around an adolescent 10-foot oak tree that had been pushed over onto the old Jeep trail from the side of the trail. The stiff root structure at the base of the tree was exposed and still partially attached to the ground, which appeared to support the approximately 4-inch diameter tree in a parallel position to the ground, sort of hovering above the ground on its side with some of its branches touching the trail. In retrospect, I have no idea what could have pushed it over in that direction. If a Jeep passing had hit it, I believe it would have fallen parallel to the road, not across it. Anyway, I sat there in silence for a bit, and all of a sudden, the steel green leaves on the small fallen tree started to shake like there was a slight breeze. But there was no breeze. The woods were dead silent, and the only sound being made was by that damn tree. It was sort of a smooth rustling of the leaves, not erratic. This went on for a minute, and I thought, well, there has to be a squirrel or a gopher or an armadillo or something in that tree. In the exposed root structure or under it, making this happen. Fed up, I walked all the way around the horizontal tree and inspected it closely. The tree stopped shaking as I inspected all the sides. Again, this was a fairly small tree with short branches. I could see every inch of it. I kicked it, nothing. I looked at the roots and the hole that was made by the roots, where it was recently upright, and there was nothing there. No critters, no bugs, no birds, no tracks, no vines, nothing. Okay, so I think maybe I'm missing something, so I just go back to my hiding spot by the old oak, and lo and behold, after about 30 seconds, the leaves start shaking again. At this point, though inexplicable, I still have no concerns other than my hunt is being messed up by this tree making this racket in the silent forest. For a minute, I just stared at it, trying to wrap my mind around what was going on. Immediately, the tree started shaking violently, as if something large got a hold of it, but again, nothing was there. Dave, at that point, my slow-to-arrive sixth sense went from 0 to 100. My adrenaline shot through the roof, and the hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up. The tree was jiggling so fast it was almost vibrating. To my horror, I realized or assumed that there had to be something large which I could not make out what was happening. Without further hesitation, I clicked the hammer back on my rifle from half-cock to full-cock and leveled the rifle on the little tree. I took a very wide berth around it and backed my way down the trail about 75 yards to the main Jeep trail where I was dropped off. At some point as I went around it or was backing away, the tree stopped shaking, but I don't remember exactly when. And no, I never fired into it. I stood there wanting my ride to come back, trying to calm down, and eventually started just watching the mysterious tree from a distance, not worrying about deer. I scoped it for some time and never saw it move again. The crazy twist to this story is a large doe walked right up next to the darn tree for about 15 minutes after I left. I did take a pot shot at her, but I don't think I really wanted to hit her. Subconsciously, I think I didn't want to walk back down there again. The deer ran off, and that was fine with me. My buddy and his dad showed up and razzed me for missing, but I never mentioned anything about the tree thing scaring the hell out of me. For clarity, I wish I could tell you that I saw a predator standing there shaking the tree and laughing at me, but I didn't see anything. I've been a cop for 23 years, and I've been frightened a few times, but never by something that I couldn't see or understand like I experienced that day. I've told this story a couple of times in my life, but folks just don't get it. Maybe you just had to be there, but no one will ever convince me that anything smaller than a man could have made that tree shake in that manner. But there was nothing human present, so what was it? Was something trying to get me in the path of that deer? I don't know. And I never will, I guess. Keep up the videos and the commentary. My prayers are with you and your family. Thank you. A few stories on the back of that. When I was in Hoopa, I heard stories like this all the time. But they weren't little trees like this that were knocked over. They were big trees that were shaken. Like 30, 40, 50-foot Douglas fir that had huge bases to them. And it was like some giant had their hand around it and was shaking the heck out of it. I heard those stories like 4 or 5 times while I was there during the years. Another story that I heard 3 different renditions at different locations, almost of the same story. A Native American was fishing on the Trinity River, kind of in an isolated spot early in the morning. There was a salmon run in the river, and he said out of nowhere, a basketball-sized rock comes flying over the top of him and landed in the middle of the river. He said he didn't hear anything, didn't see anything, but he got the message, leave, and he left. And that is the message, I think, that was trying to get across to this gentleman right here, the deer hunter. Just wanted to scare him, ruin his hunting, and get him to move on to a different area. For some reason, whatever didn't want you there. And I think that's the message that every Native American gave me when they had something like this happen. Another time, a guy was on the Klamath River, a bigger river, fishing, isolated area, and he said simultaneously, 2 basketball-sized rocks came flying, and he said he thought they flew through the air 100 yards and then landed right in front of where he was fishing. And he said he couldn't believe it. He said at the last second he kind of caught it coming out of the corner of his eye, landing in the water, and he says the splash it made was huge. He said, now can you imagine the strength it took to heave that thing that far? Yeah, scary. So, I get it. Now, we tend to think, it's a little off the normal stories for a second. We tend to think that when a government agency recommends a business, that the business would be fully vetted and you could move forward and use it appropriately. Well, for a number of years, I've known about this man. And he is the LA County Sheriff. And he's Alex Villanueva. Now, I know about him because I knew a couple of LA County deputies. One was a sergeant. He said, great man, great man. Believed in the Constitution, doesn't believe in all the rotten things that are going on in LA County. He won't let his deputies be susceptible to it. And this is a letter. This is important. This is a letter written on November 29th, this year, 2021. And it's addressed to the Honorable Board of Supervisors of the County of Los Angeles from Sheriff Villanueva. And the title is Compromised Fulgent Registration Testing Systems. Dear Supervisors, this letter is to inform you the LA County Sheriff's Department will not participate in COVID-19 registering or testing with Fulgent Genetics Corporation, Fulgent, F-U-L-G-E-N-T, due to the fact the DNA data obtained is not guaranteed to be safe and secure from foreign governments and will likely be shared with the Republic of China. On November 24th, 2021, I was contacted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation Weapons of Mass Destruction Coordinator, who shared with me the FBI's need to brief LA County leaders as to be, quoting, very concerning information, end of quotes, they learned regarding COVID-19 testing of county employees by Fulgent. On November 26, 2021, I attended a briefing at the FBI Los Angeles field office, as did the LA County Counsel Rodrigo A. Castro Silva and the Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Davenport. An invitation was also extended to each of you and the head of the Department of Public Health. The FBI stated that the purpose of the meeting was to inform county leaders of the serious risks associated with allowing Fulgent to conduct COVID-19 testing of county employees. I was shocked to learn Fulgent had strong ties with BGI, WUXP, and Huawei Technology, all of which are linked to the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences, the People's Republic of China State Council, and are under control of the PRC. I was even more shocked to learn Fulgent made no attempt to disguise the fact they will use the genetic information obtained in future studies. On the Fulgent public website, the following statement can be easily found, quoting, I also give permission for my specimen and clinical information to be used in de-identified studies at Fulgent and for publication if appropriate, end of quotes. Additionally, the 2017 China cybersecurity law makes it illegal for PRC to seize any data stored within China or stored outside of China by an entity which has a presence in China, and that organizations and network operators submit to government-conducted security checks. This was further explained recently in a New York Times article dated October 22, 2021. U.S. warns of efforts by China to collect genetic data. This article explained, quoting, Chinese companies are collecting genetic data from around the world, part of an effort by the Chinese government and companies to develop the world's largest biodatabase, end of quotes. New paragraph. I am deeply concerned as to the vetting process which either failed to discover this or discovered it but chose to ignore it. A simple internet search would have uncovered all of the above facts. On or about October 19, 2021, our department reached out to the county's Department of Human Resources liaison of Fulgent, Mr. Ben Kempner, to ask him to respond to the questions stated in the news article. LA first responders ordered to turn over personal and genetic data to China-linked company or face firing, but we were provided no response. I am equally concerned by the inclusion of an equity survey to the mandatory Fulgent database registration process. How can one provide informed consent when participation is mandatory under penalty or discipline? Entering into a no-bid contract with Fulgent Genetics and allowing them to have the DNA data obtained from mandatory COVID testing for unknown purposes has shattered all confidence my personnel have in the entire process under the county mandate. Many personnel have long suspected this information was being used in an unnecessary manner due to a rushed mandate that we now know will have long-term unintended consequences that will not be fully known for some time. The FBI felt strongly enough regarding Fulgent being used to test county personnel that they held an emergency briefing to disclose their concerns. I trust you will take steps to immediately assess and mitigate any further risk before any personnel are disciplined under the mandate for refusing to subject their information to the Fulgent system. Folks, what can I say? What can I say? This letter was put up for public viewing. I was stunned. So if China has all of your DNA, then they also know, and that will lead them to building biological weapons that may be able to use against masses that their DNA has a susceptible area. But the concerning thing to me is why this wasn't vetted properly. Yeah. Now, some of you have written to me scathing letters, and I don't care. You know, Dave, you're making a big deal out of China, and, you know, they're not our enemy, they're really our friends, and there's nothing to worry about. Well, Rocker, you under... Come on. First of all, China is not our friend. China is our adversary. They know that many people, specifically government people, are greedy. And that greed is around the world. And as I said in an earlier video, this is the way China was able to obtain contracts to control airports and ports around the world. And they were written in a fashion that they probably knew that there was corruption in certain countries when they wrote these, and that the contracts would default, which would mean they would control it at the end. They're very, very smart people. Underline, very. I have much respect with the strategy that they've taken to destroy us from within. I'm not a fool about this. Very smart people. But that letter, written by Sheriff Villanueva, I want to make sure I get his name right. Villanueva. I'm sorry, Sheriff Alex Villanueva. He's a really good American. I admire him for writing that letter. Okay. Next letter. Dave, I'm a longtime subscriber and have watched every one of your videos. Absolutely love your research and mention you often to my circle of friends. I had an experience while mountain biking in the Swasey, S-W-A-S-E-Y, recreation area in Redding, California. I'll try to keep this short. So Redding is in Northern California, right before you get to Shasta Dam. And the area he's talking about is west of Redding, in the foothills up there. I'm an avid mountain biker and have been riding most of my life. It was the day after my 40th birthday and I was living in Sacramento. My wife had to go to Redding for the day for work, and I decided to join her and ride a local trail. I've never ridden alone for the same reason you don't hike alone. But the trail I was to ride wasn't very technical, and I told myself I'd take it easy. Yeah, right. After dropping my wife off, I got to the trailhead just as a group of women mountain bikers were getting started. My instincts told me I should ask to join them, but they were heading out and I wouldn't be able to get geared up in time. I tried to catch them with so many trails in the area I never saw them again. So I head out, and it was about the 5 to 6 mile mark that I stopped for a break. I started getting a very uneasy feeling, that gut instinct feeling that brought on fear. I was high up in elevation and totally isolated. I felt like I was in danger and had to get out of the area. I got on my bike and descended about a mile of steep technical single track. About 2 miles from the trailhead, I got to a section of really flat, fast single track that made me smile. No rocky sections, no roots or obstacles at all. It was like this all the way to the trailhead. Next thing I know, I'm lying down on the trail in incredible pain. The kind of pain that makes you moan with that awful guttural sound. After maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I managed to get up and try to assess what just happened. There was nothing in sight. I was clipped into my pedals, so I was about 3 feet ahead of my bike on the trail. And my bike was just on its side as if I had laid it down with no damage at all. I didn't know at the time, but I had cracked the right side of my helmet, and my right lung was collapsed from the impact with the ground. It's as though I got blindsided by something, but there was absolutely nothing in the area that would have made me end over on my handlebars. Also, looking back, I feel I may have had some missing time, but extreme pain has a way of distorting your thoughts. To this day, I have absolutely no idea what happened, but this incident still haunts me and I think about it often. Dave, I'm curious to know if any of the villagers have contacted you with experiences while mountain biking. On a side note, I now live in Fresno and a family member is a tour guide in Yosemite National Park. I'll follow up with some stories told to me as well as an experience I had while hiking the Kaiser Wilderness area north of Shaver Lake. I'm sure you know this area. Oh yeah. Thanks for the read. Couple of things. That area just west of where he was, there's a city, I know this area pretty well, called Hayfork. I spent a lot of time in Hayfork. And a lot of weird things go on in that city, in the ground and in the air. And when I was writing the Hoopa project, I got sent there a couple different times to meet with people that had amazing stories. I made a video about a week ago about a man named McClamant, Mr. McClamant, who disappeared in Kansas. And I've heard from a couple of residents from Kansas, specifically in that area, who actually told of unusual things going on there. I'm waiting for a follow-up to get more information about it. But what surprises me is I can talk about almost any area in the world, and I'm going to get a response from somebody out there who's watching, which tells me that our viewership is huge. But those aren't reflected in the numbers, which is why I've got to get off of this somehow. My 3 criteria. I've got to find a channel where there's 100% freedom of speech and I'm not restricted. I've got to get on a channel where they monetize the content, not me. I don't want to have to charge you to watch my channel. I want them to monetize it for me. And number 3, I want to have the ability to get on the channel, load as many videos as possible, and 100% own the rights to my content and not allow them to own the content. 3 criteria, haven't found the location yet. Please don't send me sites, oh, try this or try that. I know there's dozens of sites. I haven't found a site that can do all 3 of those. If you find them, if you find one and you can guarantee that they fulfill all 3 of those, I'll look at it. I haven't found it yet though. So, next letter. Dave, I just listened to your latest video where you again stating that berry pickers were snagged especially often, and I had an idea. Of course, like so many, I've speculated about the cryptid topic, but I know that it's happened so often and with such tendencies as to basically exclude a bipedal ape-like creature, and I was wondering what other reason may cause the berry connection. Here it is. Berries typically grow near water, and berry pickers grazing on the berries linger in the vicinity, often alone. So these abducting entities seem to hang near water for whatever reason, and seem to prefer abducting people hanging near water, but often not all the time, like sailors and fishermen. Sounds like there's a Goldilocks abduction zone in two different ways. Dave, in terms of both vicinity to water and target, and for some other reason, berry pickers and elk hunters enter this zone particularly often. The portrait that comes to mind in these entities hanging around the water and rocks, observing the people passing by, and either when they're in the mood or their interest is piqued, they strike. Maybe targeting sailors, fishermen would draw too much attention to them, but if so, I don't see how. If I could guess that reason, I'd be ecstatic, but right now I wouldn't hazard to gander. Then again, maybe familiarity with the seaman and those too closely overtly linked to water breeds contempt. Or else, are they somehow protected by their water protection? I'm trying to throw out all possibilities, even if unlikely. Elk hunters, let's compare them to deer hunters. Do elk hunters just hang out near water and boulders more often, Dave? If so, why? Do they linger more often near water than deer hunters? A certain type of water? I don't know. I don't know much about hunting, period, but if we can figure out maybe one attracts the other, we don't know. Could it be it's all linked to tides? I don't know. I have another one for you, though. What if whatever's doing this is more interested in the elk than deer? Maybe it's not the elk hunter's behavior, and maybe it's not the zones that they're in. Maybe it's the elk. Just throwing it out there. Next letter. About 10 years ago, my husband and I spent most of 2 years bedridden with back injuries and surgeries. Oh, that's horrible. One day on my way to work, we were talking on the phone, and he said he felt like taking a gun and killing himself. I was about an hour away from him. I tried to encourage him to get off the phone, and by then I was at work. I called his doctor. His doctor said, "And you left him?" I was too freaked out to tell the doctor was just around the corner from work when my husband told me that. So his doctor got me in touch with a therapist that was able to fit us in that day. I called my husband and told him I was on my way home. I took him to the therapist that day and a few more times. He was also put on antidepressants. For a while, every few years, my husband would try to take himself off those antidepressants, and I could see the change in his mood, and the look in his eyes would be different. I would ask him if he was off of his depressants, and he was adamant that he would admit that he was. He finally realized that the antidepressants are the right thing for him permanently, and he's doing well. The big wake-up call for me in this situation is that I was never very understanding of someone who would commit suicide. I asked my husband how someone could actually make the decision to commit suicide. He said, when you're at that point, you don't have a choice. You cannot stop yourself. That gave me so much more compassion and understanding toward those who follow through with suicide. Thankfully, he's doing very well, and we were both very diligent with our doctor appointments and medications. God bless you for all the work you do for mental health and the missing. I'm so sorry for your loss. I truly believe that Ben is with God and is still continuing on his incredible spiritual journeys that are beyond our imaginations. Thanks. I'm glad your husband's doing better. Quick story about suicide. When you're a policeman and you get out of the police academy, you have to go through field training. Field training can last anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on the department. Well, I'd gotten out of the police academy, and I was working at the time for Fremont Police. I worked at Fremont for my first 3.5 years, and then the next 16.5 at San Jose. And I was in field training with a training officer named Bob Aaronkeel. Bob's a great guy. And when you're in training, field training officers can be less than nice. Bob was the perfect training officer. I learned a ton from him. Super smart man. Very patient. Just the perfect balance. I never saw him get mad at and or rude to anybody. And we're in some tough situations. So, and in training, you work your way through all 3 shifts: day shift, swing shift, graveyard. And I just happened to be on working day shift with Bob. It started at 6 in the morning and you got off at 3 in the afternoon. And about 1:30 in the afternoon, we get a call of a shooting at an apartment complex and a possible suicide. So we go to this apartment complex and we can hear rumbling inside this room. And people had reported hearing a gunshot the night before. So we knock on the door and we're really careful. And we've got our guns out because we don't know what's going on. And we got the apartment manager with us, and she lets us into the room. There's exigent circumstances, possible suicide, shots fired. We have exigency to enter the room. So I'm young. I mean, I was just out of the academy. And the door comes open, and you walk into a family room environment. I can remember this like it was yesterday. And it was like something out of hell. There was blood on all the walls, handprints, blood everywhere. I'm in training, so I'm leading in. It was Bob and I, and there was one other policeman behind us, and I'm leading the search going in. And we're slowly going through this house because we know something bad happened here. I'm working our way through, and each room, I think there was 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a family room. Every area we went through had blood on all the walls. I clear the kitchen, I go in, and there's blood in the sink. There's a cup there with blood coming down the side of the cup. Thinking, what the heck is going on? We finally get our way to the back bedroom, and laying on the back bedroom bed, I was a kid, I'm going to guess he was 19, 18. And he wasn't moving, but I could tell he was breathing. And he had blood everywhere. We couldn't tell where he was shot. There was a rifle laying on the floor. So we call paramedics, tell them to come in. And they transport him to Washington Hospital, still there in Fremont. And we work it as a crime scene, trying to understand, did somebody come in and shoot this guy? What happened? The way the story went is he had some depressing episode in his life. And he had a .22 rifle, and he put it in his mouth and he pulled the trigger. It didn't kill him. It traveled up the front of his face and severed the optic nerve, and he couldn't see. And he was alive from probably 5 o'clock the night before till the time we came in at 1:30 that afternoon. He had lost so much blood, it was unbelievable. But blood was pouring down his mouth too. At one point he got up to try to get a drink of water. Went to the hospital after we worked that crime scene, and Bob and I worked it together and put the pieces together as to what happened. And talked to the doctor, and the doctor said he's going to make it. He's going to live. He'll never see again. And the doctor said he was going to have to go through some surgery, some cranial surgery to take the pressure off his brain. But he said, yeah, he's going to make it. And I can remember I had nightmares about that for days. It left such an impression on me. And it was so sad to see somebody so depressed that they were willing to do that. But through the NAMI classes that I took, just like this person said in the letter, when a person gets to the point of taking their life, it's almost like weight is being lifted off their shoulders, and the path is so clear. It's so revealing. It's so freeing that it's easy to do. I've heard this many times. Now, I've been to countless suicide calls in my career, really. And very fortunate, I only went to a handful that there were actual suicides. But countless times I put people on medical health holds where they went into a hospital and they were interviewed by psychiatrists and held for up to 72 hours. And at the time when I did that as a policeman, I obviously had no insight to what I have today about mental health. And my decisions wouldn't have changed. And I don't think the way I handled it would have changed, but I think my own personal mental health would have suffered more today because I have just more of a personal connection with all of you with mental health problems. So, anyhow, let's get on to the stories that I have for you today. There's some pretty unusual ones. First one is a man named Mike Tichac, Tichac. And Mike was quite an athlete, and he grew up in Wyoming, and he liked to hunt, fish. He was a blocking back for the University of Wyoming. While he was in college, he got a scholarship. He moved to Laramie, where his family was from, and became an insurance agent. He was very successful. Well, in October 24th, 1951, he and two friends went to an area southwest of Wheatland, hunting. There's a place called the Wheatland Bypass and Wheatland Lake, and they were hunting in an area just east of the Wheatland Lake. Well, the guys all agreed to be back at the car at 9 a.m. because they got there at like 4 a.m. and they were going to hunt right at start of dawn. Well, Mike didn't show up. So his friends fired off a few rounds. They didn't get anything back, which is odd. They called the sheriff. The sheriff came out, and within hours, they had hundreds of people from the community because Wheatland was only 70 miles away. Hundreds of people came out and started searching. Well, the following day, they had 800 searchers and 9 Civil Air Patrol planes in the air looking for Mike. A phenomenal amount. Mike was known at 30 years old to being in really good shape. Well, that first day, they found a deer that he shot and tagged, because according to the law, you shoot a deer, you have to take out your license and you have a tag, and you put the tag around the antlers, and it has your hunting number on it and information stating that you're the one that shot it. And they found that. Well, that was puzzling because it hadn't been cleaned. He tagged it, but he was nowhere around. And everyone knows you shoot a deer and you clean it as soon as possible. He didn't. And he was a seasoned hunter. But they had planes in the air, and they were scouring that for the first 2-3 days. And they weren't seeing anybody. And this area of Wyoming was not a lot of ground cover. Pretty open. And they were expecting to find him, and they weren't. Well, it was super cold, and after that first day, the number of searchers dropped from 800 to 175. It's a big drop. 5 days after the search started, a searcher was 17 miles away from where Mike shot the deer, and they found Mike face up laying on the ground. He was in a t-shirt, trousers, boots, and socks. It got into the minus digits when he was missing. 100 yards away, they found his coat and his hat. They never found his knife. They never found his matches. They never found his rifle. The sheriff stated that he had to have walked over 20 miles, but didn't understand why he never saw the planes. So he disappeared on a Wednesday. The body gets taken to the coroner, and the coroner determines that Mike died on a Friday morning, which means 9 Civil Air Patrol planes were flying the sky when Mike was alive. Why didn't Mike fire off rounds from his rifle? Why didn't Mike start a fire? Why didn't Mike stand out in the open and wave his arms? Where was he? Why wasn't he found? The coroner said that there was no trauma to the body and that he died of exhaustion and exposure. Like I said, it was real cold. The distance that he traveled is so far outside the bounds of where search and rescue would look. It's ridiculous. It's amazing that they found him, number one. So he was missing clothes, point of separation. He's a hunter. They were hunting near the only big body of water in that entire region, Wheatland Reservoir. It's a story that really baffled me. But then almost every story coming out of Wyoming that fits into my world has always baffled me. So, I don't know. Another thing I've told you many times, you don't hear coroners these days saying somebody died of exhaustion. It just doesn't happen. Exposure, yes. But how many stories have I told you about where somebody died of exposure? A lot. So, here's a map for you. This is Cheyenne. This is Laramie. It's about 50 miles from Laramie to the area where they were hunting. This is the reservoir. Body found west of the reservoir. This area out here is just sagebrush, open terrain, not a lot of ground cover. Now, this is the part that truly baffles me. Mike grew up in Wyoming. He knows the sun rises in the east and falls in the west. If he was alive all day Thursday, he knew the city of Wheatland was directly east of where he was hunting. A fairly short walk. He knew that a highway was directly south and a highway was directly east. Come on. Why didn't he walk out to the right direction? He went and landed in the only place just about in that entire area where there weren't people, and that would have been west. Sorry, folks. Doesn't make sense to me at all. Not at all. So, another story. This one happened in Nevada. Charles Leroy Pitts, 37 years old, missing April 10th, 1957, just west of Wells, Nevada. Wells is just west of the Utah border in far eastern Nevada. Well, Mr. Pitts is riding a bus, and he'd been traveling cross country from New York City. I guess it was probably a Greyhound bus, but it didn't say that. Anyhow, he's riding a bus westbound through the Nevada desert. And he's just west of Wells, and he tells the driver to pull over because he doesn't feel well. That's about 7 miles west of Wells, middle of nowhere. And then he demanded to get off the bus. Driver stops the bus, opens the door, and the description was he leapt out and ran into the sagebrush. Bus driver waited, didn't come back. Drives into the next town, reports what happened to the sheriff. Sheriff goes out, searches the area, doesn't find anybody. Well, he ran into the area near what's called the Humboldt River, the only body of water anywhere in that area. Just happened to go towards water. He left behind some personal effects, including his bus ticket. Well, in September of 1957, about 4 months after this happened, 5 months, a rancher is chasing some cows in the area just north, about 5 miles north of where he disappeared. He finds a knife in the ground. Stops, gets off his horse, picks up the knife. Then he also looks around, and under some sagebrush, he finds a men's bracelet, a belt with some keys, and a billfold with the name of Charles Leroy Pitts, New York City. Keeps searching. And nearby he finds a folded suit coat, handkerchief, and a necktie. Well, that's pretty weird. And on the sleeve of the coat, it said CLT, Charles Leroy Pitts. Well, then they kept searching more, and they find some shoes kind of in the mud, not far from where they found the suit. And they also find a shirt in the mud. Then fast forward 3 years. In May of 1960, some young men were just hiking through the landscape out there in the middle of nowhere, and they find a skeleton. And there were some things on the skeleton, a pair of pants, that they linked to Mr. Pitts. They could never figure out the cause of death. Point of separation. Why did Mr. Pitts demand to get off that bus in such a frantic pace? And what made him ill? And he just happened to run towards the one body of water anywhere in the area? Well, he's missing clothing, missing shoes. He had an illness. The area that he was in, while he was missing, he could hear cars on the freeway. That's how close he was. So why didn't he just walk back to the freeway to get help? Or was he even there? So, the bus is going westbound, this direction. Right next to the highway, the Humboldt River follows the highway. Skeleton is found north of the highway up in this area. The Utah border is right here. This road, Highway 80, going, and it eventually goes to Reno and then into California. This is just a miserable stretch of road. Very lonely. Not a lot of beautiful things to see, in my opinion. But a very odd story. Very odd. But as you know, I've written a lot about stories where people suddenly need to do something. Need to run out. Need to get off a bus. Need to get off somewhere. Need to drive somewhere. It's weird. Where does that urge come from? I've told you a lot about hunters who get separated because one feels sick. Well, something separated Mr. Pitts from the rest of the people on that bus. Got him alone by himself. Next story. William Watson, 72 years old. Lived actually in Pacifica, California, which is just south of San Francisco, right on the Pacific Ocean. Very, very nice little town. Been there many times. He was a retired truck driver. And in January of January of 1982, he had a coronary bypass surgery. He got over it really quickly, but he had to take medication twice a day to keep living, according to the doctors. He lived at a place called 555 Crespi Drive on the 3rd floor. And a lot of older people lived there. He had a brown Datsun B210, and he was a retired truck driver. worked for the Teamsters. Well, on April 19th, 1982, at 4 a.m., he wakes up. This is what William looked like. He wakes up and he calls his best friend, a lady. And he says, hey, I'm restless. I can't sleep. I need to go for a drive. And she goes, oh, just take a sleeping pill. Go back to sleep. He goes, no, I'm going to go take a drive. I'll be okay. I'm going to go. So she goes back to sleep. At 10 a.m., she wakes up. She's living in the same building. She goes up to his room. The door to the room is unlocked. His pajamas are on the floor. His bathrobe is laying over a chair. And according to her, he would never leave the room like that. And it was indicative of as though he was going somewhere quickly and be right back. The other part that didn't make sense to her was that he was a heavy smoker. And all of his cigarettes and his lighter were left in the room. And his driving glasses were in the room. But the car, his Datsun B210, was missing. Very suspicious. Now, fast forward 2 months, and Santa Clara police. Santa Clara is a city right next to San Jose. Been in Santa Clara hundreds of times. His car is found on Harrison Street in Santa Clara. Police impound it, searched that whole area. They don't find him. Now he has a disability because he had that recent heart surgery. He's taking medication. He lived right next to the Pacific Ocean. Right next to where he lived, this is important. Now, the most direct route from Pacifica, which is right here, San Francisco's right there. Pacifica right here, the most direct route is getting on Highway 101 or Highway 280 and driving down to Santa Clara. It's about a 44-minute ride. But if he went from Pacifica and he took the coastal route, he had to go through what's called Devil's Slide. Devil's Slide is famous in the Bay Area for being a bad place. And he told his friends, and everyone knew, he liked driving the coast. The million-dollar question is, how did this gentleman get from his residence to 1400 Harrison Street in Santa Clara? How did he get there? And where did he go? He is still, Mr. William Watson, is still listed on the California Department of Justice database as a missing person. Never been found. How do you get lost in the middle of a big city like Santa Clara? Where does he go? Friends, if he died in a park under a bush, the odor would be so bad, everyone would smell it and he'd be found. It doesn't make any sense. Where are these people going? And then you look at all of the surrounding issues on these cases. What happened? How did Mr. Tichac, how did Mike Tichac walk 20 miles and never be seen by airplanes? Never see an airplane. How'd that happen? How could Mr. Pitts disappear in the middle of nowhere and not walk back to where the freeway was? Doesn't make any sense. And lastly, how did William Watson get his car 40 plus miles into Santa Clara, not be seen by anyone, and never be found? I don't understand. That's why you're here. It's a very confusing scenario, each one of these. I really do appreciate each one of you spending time with me every day, or every couple days. It's a huge endeavor to do these, organize them and put them in a comprehensible way in my mind so you would understand them. So please post them on your social media. If you like this, give me 2 thumbs up. Remember, canammissing.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's David Paulides at canammissing. Our movies, Missing 411 and Missing 411 The Hunted, are both available on Amazon. Missing 411 The Hunted is still free on YouTube Movies. Please post that and get that out to your friends. A lot of people don't like reading a book, but a lot of people do like watching a movie. The movie has good reviews. So pass that on and tell your friends to watch it. I've had a lot of good compliments about it, so hopefully they'll like it. And of course, our books are available on our website. Don't buy them on Amazon or eBay. People are ripping other people off on that. Books are $24.99 on our website. Somebody was just telling me the other day one book was $150 on Amazon, so don't do that. Anyhow, still time to buy and get it in time for Christmas. Nothing better than a good book. So I appreciate you being here. Be safe, love your family, and go out and do one kind thing for somebody out there in the community today. All right? Thank you. Paulides out.